So yeah, I've been in two minds about making and releasing this video. Actually, no, sorry. Let me rephrase that. I was always going to make this video about like my renting situation, how it's been in Ghana, right? It was just a case of when. But in the past few weeks, there was like a crazy escalation. And I just thought, yeah, it's probably the best time for me to make the video, especially where I have like certain details sort of fresh in my mind. But yeah, I kind of thought, in the same way, if you go on Airbnb, you're able to leave a review, you watch a movie, you're able to leave a review. I thought it would make sense for me to give my honest review of my current apartment that I'm living in. And especially since it was actually one of those apartments that was broadcasted all over social media. So it makes sense if you're going to be public or that public with how you're advertising the apartment, let me be as public with my review. I basically traded my life in London for a life in Ghana. And this for me is approaching the 7th month. And so I'm not somebody who's a stranger to renting. Like when I was in the UK, I think I counted a total of 15 houses or apartments that I have rented in my lifetime. I've had some very strange situations, but I must say, I think me being in Ghana, there is like an added layer of nonsense. And I think ordinarily, if you would ask me like what some of my favorite things about Ghana are, probably in my top 3, I'll probably say, or maybe like top 2 actually, I'll say I like the fact that there is distinctly less regulation than in places like the UK or Canada or Australia or that sort of thing. However, the downsides to that, especially when it comes to renting, is that some landlords can sort of like act with impunity. There isn't really much control there. So while you can have a renting situation which can go very well, and I have actually come across like many sort of like homeowners, landlords who, yeah, they're pretty much like, they seem to be a dream to sort of like work with or live with or that sort of thing. If you find somebody who is the opposite of that, yeah, your experience can be exponentially worse than what it can be in somewhere like the UK, for example. And like I said, again, it's because of that lack of regulation, they're not really, in many ways, they're not really held accountable for many of the things that they may or may not do. So yeah, definitely do keep that in mind, or just be aware of it when you are sort of like making that move to Ghana, if you are sort of looking to rent in Ghana, if you are also currently apartment hunting. The same way you're sort of, you're shopping for your dream apartment, your dream house that you want to rent or buy. Also, especially if you're renting, you want to pay close attention to the person who owns it, runs it. Yeah, just the landlord's nature in general. So in addition to giving like you guys who want to come to Ghana or visit Ghana and rent an apartment advice, this video is also like a 101 as sort of like what not to do if you are renting your property out to people. Okay, so this one is downstairs, but obviously I can get it upstairs, but this is just to show what the apartment looks like with like all the lights and like the finished kitchen. So I live in an area called Hacho, and it is west of Medina and it's north of an area called Achimota. So it's not central, but I can easily just sort of call an Uber, Bolt, or get a car essentially to anywhere that I need to across Accra. So I didn't really necessarily need it to be central, to be honest. So yeah, I didn't deliberately go for the area, but then obviously when I went for the house viewing and then I found out that was the area that I was in, I was okay to move there. Beautiful ceiling. And so this is 6,000 because this is actually a 2-bed, but like it feels so spacious when you're standing in. So yeah, just to point out, as I've said in the video, it costs 6,000 per month, which at the time of me viewing the apartment, so back in December 2025, that equated to around £325 per month. I guess for context, and when I say context, I don't mean in necessarily the Ghanaian context, but in the context of somebody that's from the UK. In the UK, for a room. So say if you're renting a room in a shared house, so that could be maybe a 2-bed apartment, it could be like a 5-bedroom house, just any kind of house share. The minimum amount you'll probably pay now is £800 a month. So for me, paying £325 a month for a whole apartment was a deal. However, obviously I know some of you guys are looking at the screen like,
oh, it's Ghana, why are you paying that amount of money?
Your point is totally valid, but just for me, that price point for me at the time was fine. So yeah, that's why I went for it. Yeah. And obviously, as always, because it's brand new, like, yeah, I don't have to worry about if other people have used it, the condition they've left it in. And then look at this bad boy, like this kitchen is beautiful. So this is what the kitchen will look like finished. So yeah. And then obviously with this one though, I would have to get my own fridge. But yeah, this is like the rest of the space. You got the stove and all that. You got this hood, this ceiling fan. And then yeah, you've got like the prison bars on the window. And then obviously here you've got a balcony, right? So again, like I said, I wouldn't be going for this one on the ground floor because of this view. I don't want that. But obviously if I go upstairs, there's also a balcony. And another really good thing is that, you know, you've got these sockets. So if I wanted to, I could just like work from the balcony. So yeah, I'm just gonna pause it here. I'm just gonna point out, can you see the connections on the wall? So I'm gonna bring this up later on in the video, but I don't know if you can see there's like a sort of valve looking thing and then maybe like 2 holes. So that is supposed to be the washing machine connection. Keep in mind, right? So washing machine connection on the balcony. Yeah, there's some nonsense surrounding that placement as well. But yeah, let's continue. Basically, which is amazing. Yeah, so now we're gonna go through to like the bedrooms. So here's 1 bedroom, right? So this one doesn't have a bathroom, but yeah, this is what it looks like with the lights on and all that. You got your like your ceiling fan and all that good stuff. Yeah, like as you like, amazing floor. And then you've got like the bathroom here, you've got the toilet, all that good stuff. Again, beautiful lights, you've got the water heater and like this amazing looking shower. So like if I have guests, like they can just use that. And then you've got the sink. So yeah, this is the bathroom that I'm saying that I've taken. So I've taken the guest bathroom and also that, you know, the front facing bedroom that I've just shown. Behind here, I mean, it's an interesting place to put a towel thing, but I guess I could put like a flannel type thing here. And obviously, this is me. Yeah, amazing. And then now we're gonna go across to, this is the ensuite. So similar layout, but of course we have a bathroom in here. So lighting, you've got ceiling fan, all that good stuff. Sockets. And then yeah, so here's the bathroom, again with the light on. Yeah, and then you've got like toilet, all that. Water heater, all this. Yeah, like I think this one just feels really good. Like there's a lot of space. Yeah, you can see I was very in love with the apartment. If only I knew what was to hit me later on. But anyway, let's continue. It feels airy. I can have a bedroom and then I can also have an office space as well. And again, even just the living room space is like super airy as well. So I could just like have a sofa like here in the middle and then I can like put like a dining table, which is cool. So obviously you can see here that there's a router, but it doesn't mean that it comes with like the apartments. I think this just happens to be installed, but I think from the sound of it, I would have to get my own internet installed. But yeah, like I do really like this, and so this one will be 6,000. And they've said that I'm allowed to, you know, like hang things like curtains and stuff. So it's okay for me to reasonably like put holes, like the necessary holes to like put, you know, a curtain bar, all of that. I can hang up artwork, that sort of thing. But yeah, no, it feels amazing. Yeah, they also then later said that we would have like generators and stuff like that. So that was also part of the expectation of being in the apartment. That was the initial viewing that I had. Like I said, you could tell I was in love with the apartment. I was making plans. I was, you know, pointing out where I was going to put my dining table that I do not have. I had big dreams for this place, man, but it didn't quite go to plan. So yeah, when I first moved into the apartment, it became very clear very quickly that no inspections of any kind were made before the keys were handed over to me. So like I said, the apartment, it has that kind of Instagrammable look. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, it has, you know, that expensive graffiato, the sort of, you know, the wooden paneled facade, and, you know, it just has that kind of very fancy look, you know? When you see the building, you have high expectations, but it's funny when you enter the building and when you start to experience living in the building, you realize that there are just like many mistakes that were made in the construction and then like the fitting of different things within it. Like, it's crazy. I don't understand how you can put so much money into building something like this and you've made such awful errors. And it's just very clear that they don't care. There's literally no uniformity between any of the apartments. Generally, they're the same, but in terms of like the dimensions of the different rooms, they're not the same. The positioning of different fixtures, they're not the same. And funny enough, I think it's more telling when you look at the floor and sort of like how the tiles are positioned. It's almost like the building isn't just kind of like a tall sort of cuboid shape. It's kind of like twisted like this. And so, for example, in my bedroom, the walls aren't connected at right angles. They're not 90 degrees. They're all different angles. Like, how do you do that, man? Like, it's just such a weird mistake to make. But anyway, like on the screen, I've just included some, you know, some photos, some videos of some of these like bizarre things and issues that I had to go back and forth with them for the longest time to have rectified, and not all of them were fixed. Imagine the shock of my life where, you know, moved in only to find there was zero water pressure. There was nothing. And even that, I had to fight to get that done. A friend had to come, and I think he managed to figure out of all the workers who the plumber was, who was working on site. We had to basically enlist his help. I had to pay him to come in and fit in a component that was missing in the building. So I actually had water pressure. So I could wash plates, I could take a shower, all of this. Clearly it wasn't a priority to the landlord. And in her own words, she described the issue as being negligible. There being no water pressure in my building was negligible to her. And it's not a reason for me to complain or not want to be in the apartment. So I don't know if you remember earlier, I pointed to the washing machine connection on the balcony in the showroom. So believe it or not, they decided to install the outside AC unit on top of the washing machine connection. Can you imagine? Like, right on top. And so as a result, I've not been able to like adequately slot my washing machine against the wall. I've kind of had to tilt it at a really awkward angle. And then so you have this weird thing where basically every time I put on the washing machine will migrate from one side of the balcony across to the other. So I basically have to babysit my washing machine when it's on, because you kind of don't know where it's going to end up. Yeah, another one, even the hob, the stove, it wasn't glued into the kitchen surface. So it wasn't until I decided to cook one day that I realized, like, oh, the thing is rattling. You can literally lift the stove up out of the hole. How? Even with the oven vents, like the tubing that connects it to outside, it just, as soon as you switched it on, it just started flying around the kitchen. Like, I just don't understand how you can like install certain things in your apartment and not check them out, man. So even just the general quality of the finishings in this kitchen are shambolic, and they certainly do not match the quality that was presented to me when I saw the showroom initially. It's not the same. Oh, another funny one is this ridiculous ceiling fan. You know the ceiling fan? Can you see like how off center this ceiling fan is? And the thing is, I'm not OCD, but that would probably give me a heart attack if that was in my apartment. That would give me a heart attack. And then I don't know if you can notice as well, there are like cracks There are cracks in the ceiling. Can you see? Like around where the ceiling fan is? Yeah, not good. And mind you, again, it's a new build apartment. It's a new build apartment. It hasn't been here for that long. And it's funny because there are some people, some weirdos who may watch this video and maybe they'll have little comments like, oh, you're complaining, oh, it's minor, it's minor. Do not be one of those people with that mindset, because honestly, it's the little things that will give you clues into the mindset of the kind of people that are running the building, the effort that was put into building it, and potentially any issues that you're going to have in the future. Pay attention to the tiny details. Like, they're not small things. And I think, yeah, Ghanaians have a habit of maybe they'll try and make you feel silly for harping on about those things, but pay attention to them. Honestly do. Like, I wish I had paid a bit more attention when I came for that initial viewing. I think I was kind of like just like enamored and I was just seeing stars, right? But the signs were there. And so when I first moved into my apartment, I really liked the fact that the apartment block sort of looked out onto some greenery. And in particular, in front of my balcony, there's this tree. And then it was on a Thursday that I went out onto my balcony. And behind this tree, it was kind of like under, but behind this tree, I noticed this going on. My ideal working scenario is a remote working situation. And so when I first moved here, what I would do is that I would alternate between working in shared working spaces, coffee shops, and particularly when I first moved here, I would take meetings from home. I had quite a few instances where maybe I would speak to somebody or speak to a client or something, and they would schedule in a meeting for Thursdays. And on many occasions at the beginning of the call, I would have to apologize to them, right? So imagine this, you're speaking to a client. My clients, they're not Ghanaians, right? They are very sort of internationally located. They're all over the place. I would have to apologize for any noise that they were about to hear. So yeah, you're probably wondering, you know, Laurie, you're indoors, the church service is outside, it's outdoors, you know, how bad can it really be? How is it really affecting you in this way? So advice that I would give you when you are property hunting, so if you're looking for apartments, housing, anything like that, is that avoid places that are in close proximity to places of worship. So by that, I mean places like churches, mosques, even like traditional places of worship. Avoid them. I would even say avoid schools. Obviously, I understand some people have children, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your house should therefore be opposite or next to or even a road away from a school. Especially if you're somebody who works from home, it can be extremely disruptive. And even outside of that, as I have shown to you, or as you probably already know, a lot of the times when you have these services that go on, they don't necessarily go on, within 9 to 5. I've had instances where I've been woken up out of my sleep at 4 a.m. On Fridays, they like to have all night vigil. So anybody and everybody who's indoors is disturbed. You don't want that. So you may or may not have seen those awful videos of Accra and it's flooding following heavy rainfall. And so that's why they typically advise that, when you're purchasing property, or if you're going to rent an apartment, or just anything to do with property in general, that you should research or look up what flood prone areas are. And so, like I said, I live in an area called Hacho. And so when I did that bit of research, I obviously found that, that specific area, or at least where I live in Hacho, isn't prone to flooding. And also, let's just say I don't ever really have any intention of inhabiting the ground floor. So strange as that sounds, I was just thinking, well, I'm not on the ground floor. I should be okay. What I will say, or what I will advise, is that when you are apartment hunting, I know this is probably slightly trickier, but what you in an ideal world want to be able to do is also observe the behavior of your apartment or house from the inside of the building when it rains. There are other things that can happen to your apartment other than overt flooding during heavy rainfall. And I'll particularly say that it's probably trickier to do this during the Harmattan season. So that's when I went apartment looking. And obviously during the Harmattan, it's very dry, scorching heat. You're not really going to have many opportunities for rain. But if I could somehow go back and observe the apartment during such time, I think I probably would have been saved from a lot of headache. So it was around, let's say January when I initially moved in, right? And I noticed on a particular day that there was lightning. So there was freak rainfall, which is quite unusual. Climate change, global warming and that. So something told me just to stay inside the apartment and observe it during that heavy rainfall. So that's what I did. I cancelled my Uber and I waited in the apartment. And then that's when I pretty much discovered that my windows don't really behave as windows. They sort of double as waterfalls. And this is what I mean. So in the video that I've just shown, that is footage from my kitchen. But the issue wasn't just sort of isolated to that part of my apartment. It also affected both of my bedrooms, so the front-facing bedroom and the back-facing bedroom. And it's sort of tricky for me to show in video format, but essentially what you would find is that in the daytime, you could kind of see the daylight pouring between the gaps that existed between the window frame and then the wall itself, meaning that the windows were not actually fully connected to the wall. And then there was no seal of any kind in between it. So it's kind of like the outdoors was indoors, weirdly. So it introduced water. It also introduced insects, obviously. Hello. Absolutely ridiculous, man. I've never experienced such rubbish in my life. I mean, what's the point in having windows, man? No sense to me. And so obviously I was mortified and I attempted to contact the landlord. I sent her, the videos that I'm showing, on screen. And, after ignoring me for quite a while, she was then sort of forced to pay attention. And then she sent somebody to, let's say, remedy the situation in an interesting way. So, when you have bathrooms, right, and you have, for example, I don't know, you have gaps in the wall, the sealant that they use in bathrooms like between different joints and that sort of thing to stop water from like traveling into holes. You know that silicone gun that they use? Yeah. Somebody came over with that silicone gun, and that is what they use to try and plug in the gap between the window and the wall. Yeah, kind of crazy, right? I think that they were trying to avoid doing like, you know, the big work that was required. Yeah, it doesn't take a genius to maybe guess that, you know, probably isn't going to work. And there was no surprise when later on in March, when it rained heavily again, that this happened. Okay, this is my front bedroom window, and it's pouring down. Like the whole window is filling up. All of this is filling up. And it's about to pour on the floor. Yeah, this one is already on the floor. Yeah. There's water everywhere. So yeah, absolute nonsense. One tip that I will give you is when you go for house viewings, look at the space that goes from, you know, the base of the window down to the floor. Because, you know, as they say, hindsight is 2020. And when I look back at it, I actually do remember there being like sort of these weird streaks that would go down from the windowsill down to the floor. And I remember at the time thinking like, oh, maybe it was the cleaner. So the cleaner would sometimes come and like clean the bars. And I was thinking like, oh, maybe, you know, the dirty water or the dirty cleaning water was responsible for, you know, the sort of the drop marks under the wall. So what I would advise is that if possible, when you go for house viewings, a possible telltale sign would be those watermarks or those water streaks sort of underneath the windowsill. Definitely look out for those. Yeah, I just wish I'd put two and two together, man. Like now it just seems so obvious. I'm telling you, like when you get to, let's say around April, May, June, July, like it rains frequently, man. So it's gonna be an issue. And mind you, it's still an active issue that I'm dealing with now. So particularly with new build apartments or, you know, just buildings that are in like the final stage of completion, be very, very careful of situations where the landlord has promised the addition or installation of things that you have not physically seen during your house viewing. So a common example is when you go for viewings and they take you to a showroom. That's kind of what happened with me. So when I came here, I didn't necessarily get to view the current apartment that I'm in. I was shown a showroom. So obviously, you know, the showroom, they put their best efforts into, you know, doing it up. The whole point of it is to kind of like seduce you, entice you. And 9 times out of 10, you fall in love with it. And I think the expectation is that when you move into your own apartment, that your own apartment will look exactly the same or be a carbon copy of that showroom. And many a times it's not. Many a times it's not. Like you can't guarantee that your own apartment will either match the quality or the degree of completion of that showroom that you've seen. So just keep that in mind. I know of many people that have been through that same situation. Like they've been promised something and then they've moved into the apartment. I've had people who they've moved in and pretty much like 70% of the kitchen units that they saw in the showroom, they were not given when they moved into their apartment. You know, it's crazy. So imagine they seduce you with the showroom, you pay all the money, you know, you pay for your rent up front plus a deposit, And at that point, they've locked you in. And then they allocate you your apartment only to find that it is nothing like what you first saw during your initial viewing. And it's such a common experience of people who come out here, out to Ghana, and they rent. It's not a unique situation. So just don't be one of those people. Do not be like me. Do not be like me. In my situation, there was the promise of there being generators. We were actually told that the generators would be here. I think it was either March or May. Either way, we are currently in June and there are no generators. And I've actually heard now that the landlord said, basically she's backtracked and she said like, no, we're not going to get them. So can you imagine? I'm halfway through the contract, 6 months, only to now find out that she really had no intention of installing anything. So lights out in Ghana is a very common experience. And so everybody who stays in Ghana will experience it from time to time. So it's nothing new to me. But I must say, being in this apartment, I don't think I've ever experienced lights out to the degree that I've experienced it living here at all. You know, like sometimes, if the electricity goes out, maybe you can expect it to be down for like an hour, maybe a couple of hours. Some people's houses I go to, maybe it will be down for 20 minutes, reliably so. They'll be able to almost predict when it will come back up. Here, I've had times where the electricity has gone off from maybe the afternoon or the evening, and it has been off throughout the entire night through to the morning. Right? And when I say the morning, I mean, around the time where people are sort of getting up, they're trying to get ready for work. You can imagine how disruptive that can be. And we're in Ghana, man, it's scorching hot. Like we're talking about 30-degree heat. So can you imagine going through the night consistently without sort of any way of powering your AC, your fans? Another thing as well, when that happens, the things in your fridge go off. I've had times where I've cooked in batch, put the food in the fridge, and then because the fridge has gone off for nights at a time, the stuff that I put in the fridge then spoils. I'm just wondering where all that money went to, because like I said, there's 20 of us paying rent here. That's 6,000 Ghana cedis per month plus a deposit. You do the math. That is a lot of money. It makes no sense that you have that as your price point and no generator, really? And you're surprised that people are annoyed? It's not making sense. So like, here's just like a quick sort of like side thing that I've noticed when it comes to electricity in this building. Like I've had many instances where I've topped up, and let's just say when I top up, my immediate balance doesn't match up with that amount that I've just topped up. I don't know how that is even possible. So for example, let's just throw some numbers in. So say if I decide to top up something like 20 Ghana cedis, for example, I would top it up, immediately check the balance, and instead of 20, it will say 17. And so when you go around the compound, like I've noticed, there are exactly as many prepaid electricity meters as there are apartments. But remember I said that, we have security in this building. There are also like loads of lights around and stuff like that. There's also like a security post that obviously uses electricity. You have a CCTV monitor in the security post that shows all of the CCTV footage from all of the different cameras that are stationed around the compound, right? So these are all things that they must draw from some kind of electricity source. And like I said, I frequently find that if I top up an amount of money, that my money it kind of disappears, And so I just have a theory that if there are exactly as many ECG boxes as there are tenants, that means the electricity that is being used for those other things that I've mentioned, I suspect that they're drawing from our electricity balances. That's just what I think is happening. Because I've also had times where I've topped up and then maybe I've switched everything off in the apartment. Let's say at most maybe my fridge is on, so I have to keep the fridge on because obviously I want to keep my food cool. I don't want things to go off, but that's the only thing that's on the apartment. I'll disappear for a day. I've disappeared for more than one day, and then I come back and then I check my balance, And it's drained in a way that you would think that I'd been staying in the apartment. It just doesn't make any sense. Like literally, it just falls out of your ears. And that's been a persistent issue since I've been here. Multiple people have complained, they're aware of it, and it keeps on happening. So I'm just saying, my theory is, I think that they're drawing from our electricity balance to power various other things outside of our own apartments in the building. That's just my theory. In reality, the kind of people that you have living in your apartment block, it sort of tells you whether you have a landlord who has really put effort into sort of carefully vetting the people that they've put in the building, or, just like a landlord who actually maybe cares about the well-being of their tenants, versus, a landlord who is just basically chasing the next rental payment. And I think in this case, it's just very clear that the second option is the priority of this landlord, if you get what I'm saying. So there are about 20 apartments in total here, split across 2 buildings. I think I was like the third tenant to move in. So in this building, there is a bit of everything. So, we've had sort of like families with small children. There are couples here. So for example, there's quite a few sort of like single females in the building. And then annoyingly, there's also a lot of boys. And you kind of, I don't know, some of you may or may not understand what I mean by boys. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having guys in the building. It's just a very specific kind of guy that is very difficult to live with. And it's almost like you're not just living with that guy, you're living with his friends. And so we have many of them in this building with the rest of us, with families, with couples, with women, like that sort of thing. It's just a bit of a mess. And like I said, very clearly, little consideration has been paid towards, the possible living experience or preference of people that are living here. So yeah, I understand, in theory, diversity is a good thing, but in the context of you living in an apartment, it's not necessarily the best thing. When you have sort of like rowdy get-togethers on like a Tuesday night, you have like music shaking the walls, you have random cars pulling up into the driveway at 1 a.m. Or, you're just walking around the compound and you just have like random faces appearing, it kind of starts to raise questions. And it's kind of funny how, one of the advertised benefits of this apartment is that there's security. So, these randos that pull up at 1 a.m., they just kind of freely, they're able to just walk in and out the building. And honestly, sometimes you don't even know who actually lives here and who doesn't live here. So you cannot tell me it's safe. It just doesn't make any sense. In addition to, you're contending with like church folk behind the house, you're also competing with noise that, is coming from tenants inside the building at all hours of the night as well. And some of the sounds that you hear, man, like I've heard people shrieking, like I don't know if they're out here doing exorcisms upstairs. I have no idea what's going on, man, but it's really, really chaotic. I can hear from my apartment that you can hear like fights that have broken out. And then somehow maybe the fight is like spilled from whatever apartment it started in. And then it's maybe gone out onto the landing, onto the balcony. Like, what the hell's going on there? And I'm pretty sure that the fights aren't necessarily between, the exact tenants that live here, but maybe like the guests or people that they've brought into the building. Like, it's complete chaos sometimes, man. Like, it's nuts. And then, yeah, I'm going to bring up the price point. Remember, we're paying $6,000 a month. And so in the context of, rent, especially rent that is charged in cities, you would expect if there's security that there should be like an active enforcement of certain rules, or even, I don't know if you have strangers that arrive past a certain time, there should be sign-ins or something. You should be able to account for who's going in and out of the building. So there's CCTV, but there's CCTV and security, but what is it really being used for? How can the building be that secure if that level of access is allowed to total strangers at that hour? It makes no sense. So when you go for a viewing, don't just look at what is there, look at who is there. And so if possible, in addition to viewing the apartment in the daytime, I would maybe advise going in the evening or maybe nighttime. And I say that because that is usually the time where maybe, people have come back from work, people are more likely to be indoors, and I can guarantee you'll get a better idea of just the general building energy levels or the noise levels or how secure the apartment feels when everybody's inside it. It's really important, man. It will make or break your experience. Okay, so this was part 1 of 2 of my brutally honest review of my apartment and my rental experience in Ghana. In part 2, I will give you the details and spill the tea on that so-called escalation in my situation that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So just keep your eyes open for that. I'll probably post that in the next maybe week or 2. I hope that you found this video interesting, useful, and maybe you've possibly picked up some tips and tricks for when you sort of go down the route of renting in Ghana, or to be honest, renting anywhere on the continent. I'm sure it's not, or my experience isn't unique just to Ghana. Have you had a similar situation to me? Have you had a positive experience? Have you had a negative experience? I want to hear about it. Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your stories. If you haven't already done so, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.